Nathan Johnson considered his small, isolated cabin at the edge of the Kepler woods to be his personal fortress against a galaxy that had grown far too loud, its silence broken only by the crackle of his fireplace and the hum of his aging atmospheric recycler. Two pale moons hung suspended in the twilight sky beyond his window, casting long skeletal shadows from the dense alien trees. The chirr of unseen insects and the sigh of wind through needle-like leaves were the only other constants. Years as a deep space surveyor had left him craving quiet, and this patch of reclaimed Terran wilderness, far from the bustling starports and alien emissaries, was the closest thing to peace he'd found. He'd expected to spend his retirement cataloging local flora and forgetting the stars. He certainly hadn't expected his meticulously planned solitude to be shattered by a desperate, tiny knocking at his door in the dead of a double moon night. Tap, tap, tap. Faint, almost lost in the wind, yet undeniably there. Nathan lowered the datapad he'd been reading, its glow illuminating a face weathered by years and strange suns. A frown creased his brow. Another lost traveler, probably, or some young colonist daring themselves to approach the old hermit's place. Annoyance warred with a sliver of cautious curiosity. He pushed himself up from his worn armchair, the floorboards creaking a familiar complaint. He moved to the sturdy wooden door, his hand hesitating over the latch. The knocking came again, a little more insistent this time. Still small, still desperate. He drew the bolt and pulled the door inward a crack, peering out into the moon-drenched gloom. His breath hitched. Huddled on his doorstep, so small they barely reached his knee, were three figures. They shivered violently, not just from the night's chill, but from something deeper. Their forms were unmistakably non-human, bathed in the eerie light of the twin moons. Terror radiated from them in palpable waves. Exhaustion was etched into every line of their diminutive bodies. They were alien, undeniably so, and utterly alone. The tallest of the three, a child by any species standards, straightened her small back, instinctively trying to shield the two even smaller figures huddled behind her. Her feathered crest, a fan of delicate deep crimson plumes, flared wide, a stark signal of fear against her pale, lavender-hued skin. Large iridescent eyes, like polished amethysts, stared up at him, wide with a terror that twisted something deep inside Nathan. The other two, one clutching the eldest's leg, the other barely a toddler, possessed similar crests, though theirs were a muted, trembling blue. One of the smaller ones let out a high-pitched, frightened chirp, a sound so fragile it seemed to crack Nathan's gruff composure like thin ice. The ingrained desire for solitude, for the uninterrupted peace he had so carefully constructed, warred with a sudden, fierce surge of something he hadn't felt in years: compassion. He saw not just aliens, but children, terrified and on the brink. The battle was brief. He stepped back, pulling the door wider. "Inside," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Get inside, out of the cold." They hesitated for only a moment, then scrambled past him into the relative warmth of the cabin, their fear still a tangible presence in the small space. Lyra, the eldest, kept her eyes locked on him, her small body a taut line of suspicion, even as she pushed the younger two further into the room. The smallest, Alara, stumbled, her tiny feathered crest drooping. Orion, the middle child, clung to Lyra, his luminous eyes darting around the unfamiliar surroundings. Communication was a wall. Lyra managed a few hesitant words in broken galactic common. Lost ship. Gone. Her voice was a thin thread. The others communicated only in those soft alien chirps, anxious whistles, and wide-eyed gestures that spoke volumes of their distress. Nathan's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. He gestured towards the crackling fireplace. "Warm yourselves." He fetched a couple of thick woolen blankets from a nearby chest, draping one gently over Lyra's trembling shoulders, then offering the other for the two smaller ones who now huddled together on the rag rug before the hearth. He moved slowly, deliberately, trying not to make any sudden movements that might startle them further. Their immediate needs were clear: warmth, safety, and then food. He rummaged through his neatly stocked pantry. His standard nutrient paste and dried protein bars were likely unsuitable. He offered a piece of dehydrated fruit. Lyra sniffed it cautiously, then shook her head, her crest quivering. Orion turned away, burying his face in Lyra's side. It took several attempts, a frustrating process of offering and rejection, before he found a packet of bland, carbohydrate-rich emergency rations, something designed for almost any biology in a pinch. Lyra examined it with intense scrutiny before tentatively nibbling a corner. Then, she broke off small pieces for Orion and Alara. As they ate, Nathan noticed the object Lyra clutched in one small three-fingered hand. It was a data locket, its casing scorched and cracked, its surface etched with unfamiliar symbols. It looked ancient, yet technologically advanced, a silent, damaged testament to whatever catastrophe had brought them here. His attention was drawn to Alara. The youngest was almost too weak to eat, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow. Her exhaustion seemed to dwarf even that of her siblings, a profound weariness that settled a cold weight of concern in Nathan's chest. Finally, with a little sustenance in their bellies, the sheer weight of their ordeal pulled them under. Their heads drooped, their small bodies relaxing incrementally against the warmth of the fire and the blankets. Lyra was the last to succumb, her watchful gaze on Nathan finally dimming as her eyelids fluttered closed. He carefully arranged the blankets to create a makeshift bed for them on the floor, close to the comforting heat. For a long while, Nathan simply stood there, watching the three alien children sleep. The rhythmic crackle of the fire and the soft hum of the recycler were now joined by the faint, almost inaudible sighs of their breathing. His meticulously ordered solitary life, the one he had guarded so fiercely, felt as if it had been shattered into a million pieces. Disbelief warred with a profound, aching concern, and under it all, an unexpected, unwelcome, yet undeniably present dawning of responsibility. What in the seven hells had landed on his doorstep? His gaze fell upon a tattered edge of Lyra's tunic, peeking out from beneath the blanket. Caught in the firelight, a small, intricately stitched insignia glinted, a spiral of silver thread intertwined with a deep blue stone. It was unfamiliar, alien, yet clearly a mark of significance. It was the first tangible clue, a tiny beacon in the vast unknown of their origins. What in the blazes have I gotten myself into? The thought was a dull echo in Nathan's mind, drowned out by the immediate, overwhelming reality of the three small figures huddled just inside his threshold. They were still there in the morning, not a nightmare he'd conjured from too much solitude and bad synth coffee. Sunlight, filtering through the cabin's reinforced windows, illuminated them, revealing the vibrant, almost unsettling colors of their feathered crests, muted blues and purples, tinged with the anxious red that still flickered in Lyra. Their large, liquid eyes tracked his every movement, wide with a fear that hadn't fully receded with the dawn. They were curled together near the cold hearth, a knot of alien vulnerability in the center of his meticulously ordered life. He knelt slowly, trying to appear non-threatening, offering a hand palm up. Lyra flinched, pulling her smaller siblings closer. Communication remained a frustrating, halting dance. Lyra would string together a few broken words of galactic commonship, gone dark, cold, punctuated by rapid, clicking alien sounds and frantic gestures towards the sky, then back to the ground. Orion and Alara offered only soft chirps and whistles, their body language a clear language of distress and exhaustion, but little else Nathan could decipher. He tried simple questions, pointing to himself, then them. Who? You? Lyra just shook her head, clutching the damaged object in her hand tighter. Hunger was the next immediate problem. He fetched some nutrient paste, standard issue for long hauls, then some dried fruit from his stores. He offered them one by one. They recoiled from the paste. The dried fruit earned tentative sniffs, then sharp, definitive shakes of their heads, their crests flattening in clear aversion. His stomach tightened. Standard human rations, even the blandest, were useless. What did these creatures eat? He didn't have a xenobotanist lab or a universal food resequencer. He retreated to his workbench, pulling out his old surveyor's portable medical scanner. It was designed for basic life sign readings in unknown environments, non-invasive. He approached Lyra first, holding up the small device. She tensed, but her eyes, darting between him and the scanner, held a flicker of something besides pure fear, perhaps recognition of a tool, or simply desperation. He activated it, a soft blue light washing over her. The scanner chirped, displaying complex, unreadable physiological data, multiple organ systems he didn't recognize, a unique energy signature, a completely alien metabolic rate. He performed quick scans on Orion and Alara, getting similar results, confirming they weren't just a variant of a known species. They were profoundly, fundamentally alien. He needed context. He looked at the small, stylized insignia visible on the tattered fabric of Lyra's sleeve. A swirl of silver threads forming a symbol he vaguely recalled seeing in some ancient database. He cross-referenced it on his console, filtering through obscure species logs. The results were sparse, but they were there. Daxamite, a humanoid species from the Outer Rim, known for isolation, strong family bonds, and rumored empathic abilities. Little else was recorded. Peaceful. That word echoed in his mind, a stark contrast to the terror in the children's eyes. Putting the pieces together, Lyra's fragmented words, the symbol, the database entry, the picture solidified, grim and heartbreaking. They were Daxamite refugees, their home destroyed, fleeing something terrible. The damaged object Lyra clutched was likely their only link to what was lost, or what remained. As he processed this, a soft, distressed whine drew his attention. Elora, the youngest, was shivering, a faint, patchy rash spreading across her delicate skin. Her breathing sounded shallow, raspy. It wasn't just hunger or cold now. This was specific, biological distress. He felt a jolt of pure animal fear, the kind that cut through his practiced solitude and slammed him back into the harsh realities of the galaxy. He focused the medical scanner on Alara, running a more detailed environmental analysis alongside her biological one. The scanner's display flickered, highlighting a specific atmospheric component, a common mineral dust native to Kepler's claim, harmless to humans and most life, but causing a severe, allergic-like reaction in the Daxamite child. Her tiny lungs were struggling to filter it. He had to act. Fast. He scrambled to his workshop corner, rummaging through dusty surveyor cases, atmospheric filters. He had spares for hazardous environments, but nothing this specific. He grabbed a multi-stage purifier unit, an environmental sensor array, a coil of biomesh, and a handful of power cells. His hands moved with the practiced efficiency of years spent improvising solutions in hostile conditions. He worked quickly, splicing wires, recalibrating sensors, fitting the mesh into a makeshift housing, jury-rigging a localized system designed to scrub the air of the offending particles and create a small, clean zone. He set it up near the hearth, a humming, ungainly contraption of wires and repurposed tech. He gently guided Alara towards it, her breathing ragged. As the filter whirred to life, pumping a small bubble of purified air, her tiny body seemed to relax. The rasping lessened. The angry red rash began, slowly, to fade. A shaky sigh escaped her. Relief, pure and profound, washed over Nathan. He had done something. He could help. Lyra, who had watched his frantic work with wide, wary eyes, her crest a tense orange, now saw Alara's visible improvement. Her crest shifted, the orange softening, giving way to streaks of hesitant yellow, a flicker of curious blue. She looked at Nathan, then at the humming machine, then back at Nathan. The fear in her eyes was still present, but now it was mixed with something new, something that looked suspiciously like cautious hope. She then raised the damaged object she held, extending it towards him hesitantly. It was a data locket, intricate and clearly alien, but cracked and sparking faintly. She spoke, a rush of broken common and desperate gestures. Home family. Inside. Broken. Fix the locket. It held their story, their connection to what they'd lost, and maybe, just maybe, a path forward. He took the locket, its surface cool and smooth despite the damage. The data port was shattered, the casing warped. Accessing this wouldn't be a simple matter of plugging it in. It would require delicate work, bypassing corrupted systems, navigating alien encryption, a significant technical challenge even for his skill. As he examined the locket, lost in thought, a small hand gently touched his arm. Orion, the middle child, stood beside him, looking up with those huge, luminous eyes. There was no fear there now, only a quiet intensity. Nathan looked down, met the child's gaze, and in that moment, felt something unexpected ripple through him, a faint echo of his own long-buried loneliness, a pang of grief for a past he rarely allowed himself to touch. It was fleeting, unsettling, and seemed to emanate from the child's touch. He looked at Orion with new interest, wondering about the rumors of Daxamite empathy. His long-range comm receiver, usually silent save for automated weather reports, crackled to life in the background. A fragmented news report, static-laced, filtered into the cabin. Unidentified hostile activity. Sector Gamma 7 catastrophic event. Reports of systematic evacuation failures. Gamma 7, that was the general location of the Daxamite home system. Systematic. The word hung in the air, chilling. He looked from the comm receiver to the children, huddled by the hearth, then back to the damaged locket in his hand. Unidentified hostile activity. Systematic. Catastrophic event. Daxamites. The pieces clicked into place with sickening finality. The threat they fled wasn't just a localized disaster or a random attack. It was vast, powerful, and deliberate, and if it was systematic, it might not be finished. They could be looking for survivors. Looking for these survivors. Watching them sleep now, Ilara breathing easier in the purified air bubble, Orion curled against Lyra still clutching the locket even in slumber, Nathan felt the last vestiges of his cherished solitude crumble away. The quiet of his cabin was no longer empty. It was filled with fragile, alien life. His life, his peace, his safety, they were no longer his own. He had taken them in. He had saved one of them. He had seen their fear, their vulnerability, their quiet hope. He was responsible now. Profoundly, terrifyingly responsible. The locket. It was their only lead. Their only chance. He had to try. He had to understand what they were running from, and where they might possibly run to. He set the locket carefully on his workbench, gathering his precision tools, his diagnostic probes, his micro-soldering iron. The quiet of the cabin settled once more, broken only by the soft hum of the filter, the gentle sounds of the children's breathing, and the faint, almost inaudible whir of Nathan's tools as he began the painstaking process of dissecting the secrets held within the damaged alien device. His unexpected family slept nearby, oblivious to the shadow that had just lengthened over their fragile sanctuary. The hum of the atmospheric recycler was the only sound in the cabin, a steady counterpoint to the alien chirps and rustles from the corner where the children slept. Nathan sat hunched over his workbench, the damaged data locket under the focused beam of a diagnostic lamp. Hours bled into one another. He worked with the quiet intensity of a man who understood broken things, his calloused fingers manipulating salvaged micro-tools, coaxing frayed data conduits to reconnect, skipping damaged areas using custom circuits. The locket's smooth, alien alloy resisted his probes, its internal architecture unlike anything in his surveyor's database, but years spent patching together derelict sensors and coaxing life from failing drives had taught him patience. He muttered to himself, a low stream of technical jargon and quiet frustration, the scent of ozone from his soldering iron sharp in the air. This wasn't just about curiosity anymore, it was about answers. Across the room, the three small forms shifted. Ilara, curled tight in a nest of blankets near the dying embers of the fire, let out a soft sigh, her downy crest pulsing a gentle, sleepy yellow. Orion lay on his back, eyes closed, his small hands resting near his face, his breathing even. The raw terror that had clung to them the night before seemed to have receded, replaced by the cautious peace of temporary safety. Orion's crest, usually a reactive indicator of his surroundings, now held soft, muted tones, pale blue of calm, faint green of budding curiosity. He'd tentatively reached out to touch the smooth wood grain of the table earlier, then pulled back, startled by the unfamiliar texture. Nathan had simply nodded, leaving a small, smooth riverstone nearby for him to explore. Lyra, though still guarded, watched Nathan from beneath the edge of her blanket. Her large eyes tracked his movements, assessing his focus, his lack of sudden gestures. The sharp, fearful red of her crest had softened to a wary violet, tinged with the pale green of observation. She hadn't spoken much, her galactic common broken and hesitant, but her silence was less a shield now, and more a quiet study. She'd flinched when he first picked up the locket, clutching her siblings tighter, but as she saw his careful, almost reverent handling of the device, some of the tension had eased from her small shoulders. He'd offered her a piece of dried Kepler fruit he'd found in his stores, something the scanner confirmed was safe for their biology, and she'd taken it with a hesitant hand. her crest briefly flashing a soft, surprised yellow before returning to violet. Nathan had tried to introduce simple routines, shared meals, even if his food was mostly inedible to them save for a few fruits, and specially synthesized nutrient paste he'd managed to create using his resequencer. Quiet time by the fire, where he'd read from an old, battered book of Terran poetry, the rhythm of the words seemingly soothing even if the meaning was lost. He'd shown them how to wash their hands in the basin, patiently demonstrating the motions. Small, mundane acts that chipped away at the strangeness, building tiny islands of normalcy in the vast, terrifying ocean of their displacement. One evening, as Nathan worked on the locket, feeling the familiar ache settle into his shoulders, Orion padded silently across the floor. He stopped beside Nathan's chair, looking up at the human's tired face. Nathan paused, meeting the child's large, luminous eyes. Orion reached out a small hand, not to touch the locket, but to gently rest his fingers on the back of Nathan's hand where it lay on the workbench. His crest pulsed a deep, resonant violet, a color Nathan was beginning to associate with something profound, something beyond simple emotion. There was no sound, no word, just the light touch and the child's steady gaze. In that moment, Nathan felt something shift, a faint echo of a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in years, a quiet understanding, a sense of being seen, not just as a solitary figure, but as someone carrying a burden. It was gone as quickly as it came, but the warmth lingered. Orion squeezed his hand once, a tiny, comforting pressure, before retreating back to his blanket. Nathan swallowed, looking down at his hand, then back at the locket, a renewed sense of purpose hardening his tenacity. Hours later, deep in the double moon night, a low, insistent chime sounded from Nathan's long-range sensor grid console. It was a signature alert, one he hadn't heard triggered by anything less than a major system anomaly or a high-energy military jump. He pushed away from the workbench, the locket momentarily forgotten. The console screen, usually displaying local atmospheric data and wildlife movement, now showed abstract energy readings entering the Kepler's claim system. Not one signature, but several, tightly grouped, highly advanced. Unfamiliar. Nathan's gut tightened. He cross-referenced the signatures with his limited galactic database. No match for standard Alliance craft, corporate transports, or known local traffic. They were fast, silent, and their energy profiles were unlike anything he had logged in decades of surveying. He recalled the fragmented news report he'd intercepted days ago, the one Lyra's nightmare had echoed aggressive unknown forces. A cold dread settled in his stomach. The console display shifted. The signatures weren't just entering the system, they were deploying, spreading out into a methodical planetary scan pattern. And the focus, the undeniable, chilling focus of the grid, was the vast, uninhabited wilderness of Kepler Woods. His woods, the region surrounding his cabin. They were searching, and they were getting closer. There was no time for panic. Nathan moved with the efficiency of long-dormant training. He killed non-essential power, plunging most of the cabin into darkness, save for the faint glow of the console and the embers. He sealed vents, pulled heavy, light-blocking shutters across the windows. He grabbed an old surveyor's sensor mask, a flexible mesh designed to absorb and scatter energy signatures, and draped it over the console and parts of the room. Every movement was precise, economical. His mind raced, calculating energy footprints, atmospheric interference, local magnetic anomalies he could use to their advantage. A low, resonant hum began to penetrate the cabin walls, growing steadily louder. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't local wildlife. It was mechanical, powerful, and utterly alien. Nathan glanced at the sensor display. A single, strong signature was now directly overhead, descending into the upper atmosphere. Then, through a crack in the shutters, he saw it, sleek, black, silent, save for the hum. A small, automated drone, barely larger than his old scout ship shuttle, descended through the twilight sky above the tree line. Its forward section glowed faintly, a focused sensor array methodically sweeping the forest floor below. A silencer scout. Here, now. Quiet, Nathan breathed, his voice low and urgent. He scooped up Ilara, who had woken with a soft whimper, and gestured sharply to Lyra and Orion. Cellar, now! He led them quickly to a reinforced hatch hidden beneath a rug near the fireplace. It led to a small dry cellar he'd dug years ago for emergency supplies and storm shelter. The air was cool, damp, smelling of earth. "Stay here," he whispered, his eyes locking with Lyra's wide, fearful ones. Absolute silence. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." He saw the understanding in her gaze, the fear for her siblings overriding her own terror. Her crest was a vivid, trembling red. He closed the hatch, plunging them into near darkness, then scrambled back towards his workbench. The drone's hum was louder now, directly overhead, a physical pressure against his eardrums. He needed a diversion, something to draw its hungry sensors away. His eyes landed on a pile of salvaged equipment, an old, defunct power cell, a length of high-resistance wiring, a handful of chemical heat packs he used for cold nights. It wasn't much, but it might be enough. Working with frantic speed, his hands moving on instinct, he stripped the wiring, connected it to the power cell, rigged a simple circuit to rapidly discharge the cell's residual energy through the heat packs, creating a sudden, intense thermal and electromagnetic spike. Crude, desperate, but perhaps effective against sensors looking for specific energy profiles. He snatched up the makeshift device, darted to the back of the cabin, and slipped out a small, rarely used service hatch that opened into a dense thicket of Kepler brush. The drone's hum was deafening now, the scanning light visible through the leaves. He crawled away from the cabin, deeper into the brush, the cool, damp earth pressing against his skin. He needed distance, just enough to make the spike seem like something else. Something not originating from a structure. He found a small rocky depression about 50 meters from the cabin, partially shielded by dense bioluminescent moss. He placed the device there, triggered the circuit with a twist of the wires, and scrambled back towards the cabin hatch, listening intently. Back in the cellar, Lyra held Orion and Alara tight. Orion trembled, his crest flashing red and blue. Alara whimpered softly, burying her face in Lyra's shoulder. Lyra's own crest was a fierce, protective red, her eyes squeezed shut, focusing all her will on keeping her siblings still, silent. She heard the drone's hum, felt the vibration through the earth. She heard Nathan's frantic movements above, the soft click of the hatch. She didn't understand what he was doing, but she understood why. He was fighting for them, and she had to help by being brave. She held her breath, willing her siblings to do the same. Above, Nathan reached the service hatch, just as the makeshift device flared. A sudden, intense spike registered on his wrist-mounted scanner thermal, electromagnetic. Crude but potent. He held his breath, watching the drone through the leaves. The drone paused. Its hum shifted frequency slightly. The scanning beam hesitated, then slowly, deliberately, began to pivot away from the cabin, focusing on the sudden anomaly in the rocky depression. It hovered there for a long moment, analyzing, before its hum intensified and it ascended, altering its methodical grid search to investigate the false lead Nathan had planted. The sound of its engines faded into the night. Silence. Nathan waited, straining his senses, listening for any lingering echoes, any secondary signatures. Nothing. The night sounds of Kepler Woods slowly reasserted themselves, the alien crickets, the rustle of leaves in the wind. He let out a long, shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He hurried back inside, pulled open the cellar hatch. The children blinked in the faint light, their faces streaked with tears and dirt, their crests slowly fading from red to trembling shades of yellow and blue. Nathan knelt, pulling all three into a tight, fierce hug. Alara buried her face in his neck, small hands clutching his shirt. Orion clung to his arm. Lyra, still tense, leaned into him, her small body trembling, her crest a soft, relieved yellow-green. They were safe. For now, the shared terror, the shared evasion, had stripped away the last layers of wariness. He wasn't just the strange human in the cabin, he was their protector. Shaken, Nathan returned to his workbench. The close call had hammered home the urgency. He looked at the data locket with renewed focus, his fingers tracing the lines of damage. He needed answers, and he needed them now. He leaned closer, examining the complex interface, recalling Lyra's earlier hesitant gesture towards a specific symbol. He placed his own hand on the locket, aligning his fingers near the symbol she had indicated, his mind still buzzing with the adrenaline of the evasion. A soft click, a low thrum of power unlike the locket's previous inert state. The damaged crystal surface flickered, then stabilized, displaying a stream of alien script and fragmented images. It was corrupted, broken, but readable. The first image showed a dark, sleek ship like the drone he'd evaded, but bigger, a war vessel. The script scrolling alongside it identified the vessel class, and below that, a name, Silencer. The data confirmed their identity. More followed. Schematics of devastating weapons, logs detailing planetary bombardments, chillingly clinical reports of population culling and resource acquisition. The Silencers were not just aggressive, they were systematic exterminators. Their targets, Daxamite worlds. Their goal, eradication. The scan pattern wasn't random, it was a hunt. They were following the faint energy trail left by the children's escape pod, or perhaps the unique biological signatures of the Daxamites themselves. The locket's data scrolled on, revealing the grim truth of the Daxamite fate, the scale of the genocide. But amidst the horror, a fragmented reference appeared, a sequence of numbers and symbols, partially corrupted. A location? A code? It was followed by a short, looping audio file static, then a voice, distorted but clear enough to understand. Find us. Coordinates. Hope endures. A rallying point? A hidden refuge? The full details were lost in the corruption. Nathan stared at the locket, then looked across the room at the three sleeping children, huddled together for comfort. Silencers. Exterminators. Hunting children. The galaxy he had retreated from, the one he thought he had escaped, had just delivered its cruelty directly to his doorstep. He held the locket, the weight of the fragmented data heavy in his hand. He knew who they were, why they were here, and that they wouldn't stop searching. The children were in unimaginable danger, and his quiet cabin was no longer a sanctuary, but a potential trap. But the locket held a hint of something else. A possibility. A path forward. He looked from the stark data on the locket to the innocent, trusting faces of Lyra, Orion, and Alara. The Silencers were coming. He had to unlock the rest of the locket's secrets. He had to find that hope. And he had to protect his kids. The hum of the Silencer drone faded into the night, leaving behind a silence that felt louder than the noise had been. Nathan scanned the cabin's interior with a practiced eye. Nothing broken, just dust kicked up. A few items knocked from shelves. More importantly, the children. They huddled together near the fireplace, small bodies trembling, eyes wide and dark, reflecting the firelight like polished obsidian. Physically unharmed, yes, but the close call had shaken them to the core. "Hey," Nathan said softly, kneeling a few feet away. He kept his movements slow, non-threatening. "It's okay. It's gone." He gestured towards the ceiling, then made a downward motion with his hand. "Gone. Safe." Lyra nodded, pulling her siblings closer. Her feathered crest, which had flared a violent red during the drone's pass, was slowly receding to a muted, fearful gray. She whispered something in their language, her voice tight. "We need to be very, very quiet now," Nathan continued, his voice low and firm. He held a finger to his lips. "Still, they might listen. They might send others." He looked at Lyra, making sure she understood. "Others?" he repeated, then mimed hiding. "Stay hidden." Lyra nodded again, her gaze steady despite the fear. She relayed the instructions to Orion and Alara, who pressed themselves tighter against her, small, vulnerable shapes in the firelight. The palpable tension in the cabin was a heavy blanket stifling the air. Later, with the children settled but still jumpy, Nathan returned to the damaged data locket at his console. The urgency was a knot in his gut now. The Silencers knew something was here. This locket was their only lead, their only potential path forward. He ran diagnostics again, the alien interface glowing stubbornly, the encryption layers a Gordian knot of symbols and energy lock. He tried different decryption algorithms from his old surveyor kit, brute forcing, looking for backdoors, anything. Frustration gnawed at him. It was like trying to pick a lock designed by a completely different civilization using only a bent paperclip. He rubbed his tired eyes, the glowing interface blurring. The silence of the cabin pressed in, broken only by the faint hum of the atmospheric recycler and the children's soft, uneven breathing. He needed a break. They needed a break. He found a few pieces of charcoal from the fireplace and some clean, smooth rocks. He knelt near the children, pushing the console's frustration aside. "Hey," he murmured. "Want to sketch?" He showed, drawing a basic figure on a rock. Lyra watched, careful. Orion tilted his head, curious. Alara blinked slowly. Nathan gave them the charcoal. Lyra hesitated, then tentatively took a piece, mimicking his action, drawing jagged lines that might have been mountains or shattered buildings. Orion, after watching Nathan draw a simple star, carefully drew a series of interconnected circles. Alara just held the charcoal, running her small fingers over its rough surface. Nathan didn't push. He just sat with them, drawing simple shapes, the quiet scratching sound a small comfort in the oppressive silence. He showed them how to make smudges, how to draw thicker lines. He drew a picture of the cabin, then of the woods. He drew the two moons outside. Lyra watched him, her initial wariness slowly softening. She saw the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the gentle patience in his hands as he showed Orion how to hold the charcoal. This wasn't the cold, impersonal efficiency she might have expected from a stranger, especially a human, given the stories she'd heard. It was quiet, steady care. It was a stark contrast to the sharp, brutal efficiency of the dark ships, the ones that had torn their world apart. Her grip on the charcoal loosened slightly. As Nathan drew, focused on creating a simple, comforting distraction, a strange sensation bloomed in his chest, a warmth, a sense of being understood, a quiet echo of his own deep-seated worry. He glanced up. Orion was looking at him, his large, iridescent eyes fixed on Nathan's face. The child's feathered crest was a soft, calming shade of violet, tinged with a gentle yellow. Orion slowly reached out a small hand and rested it against Nathan's leg. There was no pressure, just contact, but the feeling intensified, a silent acknowledgement of the burden Nathan carried. It was unnerving, but also comforting. When the drawing session ended, leaving charcoal smudges on rocks and fingers, Nathan stood and stretched. He looked around the cabin, seeing it through new eyes. It was a shelter, yes, but it felt vulnerable. He spotted a small gap in the window frame near the floor, a source of a subtle draft. He went to his workbench, found a piece of sealant and a small tool. He knelt and methodically sealed the gap, smoothing the material into place. It was a small thing, easily overlooked, but it felt important. A physical act of reinforcing their fragile sanctuary. He glanced over as he worked. Alara had crawled closer, watching his hands with wide, fascinated eyes. As the night wore on, Nathan kept one eye on his sensor array. The patterns had changed. The broad, sweeping aerial scans of earlier were gone, replaced by tighter, more focused grids. Lower altitude readings, too. They weren't just looking from orbit anymore. They were searching the surface, methodically. His gut tightened. This was more serious. Then specific signatures began to appear on the perimeter sensors, multiple small, moving contacts entering the Kepler woods near his location. Ground units. Automated trackers, maybe? Or small scout teams. The threat was no longer distant and aerial. It was here on the ground, closing in. "All right," Nathan said, his voice low and urgent. He gathered the children quickly but gently. Lyra's crest flared red again, but she didn't question him. Orion whimpered softly. Alara clung to Lyra. "We can't stay here. We need to move." He grabbed a small-pack medkit, water purifier, energy bars, a multi-tool, a signal jammer. He led them out the back, into the deep shadows of the Kepler woods. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of alien pine and damp earth. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sounded like a drumbeat in the sudden silence. Nathan moved with the quiet efficiency of a seasoned surveyor. He knew these woods, knew the game trails, the rocky outcrops, the dense thickets that offered cover. He used his handheld sensor to detect the searchers' movement, guiding the children along paths that kept them downwind, using natural terrain features as shields against scanners. It was a tense, silent ballet of evasion. Lyra stayed right behind him, holding Alara, her eyes constantly scanning the darkness. Orion stumbled occasionally, but Lyra steadied him. They ducked behind a massive, gnarled tree as a distant, rhythmic thump-thump-thump grew louder, the sound of automated footsteps. Nathan checked his sensor. The search unit was close, moving parallel to them. He needed a distraction. "The locket," Lyra whispered suddenly, her voice strained. She fumbled with the data locket, holding it out. There's a sequence, a pattern. On the oldest stories, it might, she trailed off, gesturing vaguely. Nathan didn't hesitate. He took the locket, his mind racing. Old stories, patterns, Daxamite culture. He remembered seeing recurring symbols in the corrupted data. He quickly accessed the locket's interface, inputting the sequence Lyra described, a series of touches and gestures on the glowing surface that felt instinctively right, like turning a hidden key. The encryption symbol on the display flickered, then dissolved. Just as the locket unlocked, Orion gasped, his crest flaring a brilliant, alarming red. He pointed a trembling finger deeper into the shadows towards a seemingly empty patch of woods. Cold, he whispered, his voice tight with fear. Bad. Nathan reacted instantly, yanking Lyra and Alara back, pulling Orion with him, diving behind a thick curtain of bioluminescent ferns. A moment later, a shimmer in the air persisted into the faint outline of a cloaked silencer scout, its optical sensor sweeping the area they had just been in. The scout moved past, silent and deadly, following the path they would have taken. Orion's empathy had saved them. They waited, breathless, until the scout's signature faded on Nathan's sensor. Then, moving quickly, Nathan led them deeper into a rocky ravine, following a narrow, twisting path he'd used years ago. It led to a small, hidden cave, almost completely obscured by overgrown vines. It was damp and smelled of mineral dust, but it was safe. For now, they collapsed inside, the sudden silence a shock after the tension of the woods. Exhausted, trembling, but safe. Nathan checked them over again, pulling them into a rough, comforting embrace. In the relative safety of the cave, Nathan activated the data locket again. The interface was now fully accessible. He and Lyra leaned close, the projected light illuminating their faces. The locket displayed a star chart. A path was highlighted, stretching across vast distances, through nebulae and uncharted space, ending at a set of precise coordinates in a remote sector. Alongside it was a recorded message, the face of an elderly Daxamite appearing in the projection, his eyes filled with sorrow and defiance. To any who survive, the old Daxamite's voice was raspy but clear, translated by the locket's interface. Find us at these coordinates. We gather in the Veil of Cygnus, Sector Gamma 7, deep within the nebula. It is dangerous, hidden space, known only to the oldest charts. There is hope, but the path is perilous. The silencers hunt us across the stars. They watch the known route. Trust no one but your own kind. The journey is long. The risks are extreme. But hope endures. Find us. The locket also contains schematics of a silencer scout ship and detailed logs of their tactics, including the energy signatures Orion had sensed. It was critical intelligence, but the primary message was clear. A potential refuge, but a deadly journey. Nathan looked at the coordinates. The Veil of Cygnus. He knew it. A treacherous, radiation-filled nebula he'd surveyed decades ago, charting hazards no one else dared to approach. It was a perfect hiding place, but getting there. It's far, Lyra whispered, her eyes fixed on the star chart. And the silencers. They are everywhere. Nathan nodded grimly. This planet, Kepler's claim. It's too exposed now. They know something's here. They'll bring more ships, more hunters. He looked from the locket's projection to the children's tired faces. Staying is getting more dangerous by the hour. Going is also dangerous, Lyra said, echoing the locket's warning. Very dangerous. Yeah, Nathan admitted. That nebula, it's nasty space. My old scout ship, the Wanderer. She's berthed about a day's trek from here, mothballed. She could make the trip, maybe. But she's old, slow, and getting her ready. It's a risk. He looked at Lyra, at Orion, and Alara huddled beside her. The weight of the decision settled on his shoulders, heavy as a collapsing star. Stay and hide, hoping the silencers eventually leave, or risk everything on a desperate galaxy-spanning dash through hostile space? Lyra looked at the coordinates, then back at Nathan. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the weariness, but also the unwavering grit that had kept them safe so far. She thought of the dark ships, of the cold fear, and then of the quiet cabin, the simple drawings, Orion's gentle touch, Alara watching Nathan fix the window. She thought of hope. "We go," she said, her voice small but firm. She looked at the projected star chart, then up at Nathan. "We try." The old one said, "Hope endures." Nathan met her chaza. He saw not just a child, but a survivor, a protector in her own right, carrying the weight of her species' future. He saw the same dedication he felt burning in his own chest. "Okay," Nathan said, his voice rough. He looked at the coordinates, at the map of the deadly nebula. "Okay, we go." He deactivated the locket, the light fading, leaving them in the dim cave. But the coordinates, the message of hope, and the grim reality of the danger were etched in his mind. They had a path now, a terrifying path, but a path nonetheless, and they had to start moving, now. The hum of the Wanderer's aging systems filled the hidden hangar, a low thrumming promise of distance and safety. Nathan knelt beside a control panel, Lyra mirroring his movements with surprising dexterity, her small fingers tracing diagnostic readouts. Orion sat nearby, carefully polishing a scuffed piece of the ship's hull with a soft cloth, while Alara slept soundly in a makeshift nest of blankets in the corner, her breathing steady thanks to the jury-rigged atmospheric filter Nathan had integrated into the cabin systems, and now, the ship's... They worked with quiet urgency, the decision made. The data locket held coordinates to a potential Daxamite refuge, and the Wanderer was their only path to reach it. Then, the high-pitched shriek of the cabin's external sensors tore through the hangar's relative peace. Nathan slammed a hand onto the console, pulling up the long-range scan. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a scout, not a probe. A full net of ground-based silencer units, converging rapidly, their energy signatures burning bright on the display. They hadn't just been found. They were cornered. "No," Nathan breathed. The word a rough whisper. He looked at the ship, systems powering up but still far from jump readiness. Looked at the children, their small faces illuminated by the console's glow. Escape was impossible. Not now, not like this. His expression resolute, the grim purpose he thought he'd left behind in the void hardening his features. There was only one option left. They had to fight. The Kepler Woods, once his sanctuary, became his battleground. Nathan moved with a surveyor's intimate knowledge of the terrain, setting energy flares disguised as bioluminescent flora, routing sonic emitters to mimic local fauna stampedes, and using old seismic charges, recalibrated to cause controlled rock slides rather than excavation. The silencer units were precise, relentless, their metallic forms gliding through the trees, red optical sensors sweeping the darkness. But they were blind to the subtle language of this world, a language Nathan had spent years learning. Lyra stayed close to him, her fear evident in the deep crimson of her crest, but her mind sharp. "That one," she pointed, her voice tight but steady. "Its energy pattern, different. Shield weak on left side." Orion, hidden with Alara in a reinforced cave Nathan knew, pressed his small hands against the damp rock. "Cold," he chirped, a sound that cut through the tension. "So cold. Moving here." He tapped the rock floor, indicating a flanking unit Nathan hadn't detected. Their unique senses, honed by instinct and species, were the early warning system his tech couldn't replicate. Nathan leveraged every bit of his experience. He drew 2 units into a narrow ravine, triggering a calculated rock slide that buried them. He used the ship's incomplete power core, brought online remotely, not for FTL, but for a massive, non-damaging electromagnetic pulse timed perfectly to coincide with 3 units breaching his perimeter. The pulse overloaded their short-range sensors and briefly scrambled their targeting, buying him precious seconds. He hit one with a blast from a spare energy rifle. One fell in a deep old trap he'd made long ago. Then, silence. The shrill alarm on his wrist device quieted. The energy signatures on the scanner winked out or retreated. The silencer units were gone, defeated, or routed, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and disturbed earth. Nathan stood amidst the trees, chest heaving, the rifle heavy in his hands. He stumbled back to the cabin, the children emerging cautiously from their hiding place. Lyra ran to him, her small arms wrapping around his leg. Orion followed, looking up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Alara, awakened by the noise, began to whimper. Nathan sank to his knees, pulling them close, burying his face in Lyra's soft, feathered crest. "It's over," he rasped, the words catching in his throat. "You're safe." Lyra pulled back, her crest slowly shifting from crimson fear to a soft, hopeful violet. She looked at him, not with the wary eyes of a refugee, but with something deeper, something that mirrored the protective fire he felt for them. You fought for us," she whispered, her galactic common almost perfect now, honed by weeks of listening and need. Like Atha. She fumbled for the Daxamite word, then looked at him, her eyes shining. "Father?" Nathan's breath hitched. He hadn't expected that. Not like this. He pulled them all into a fierce, trembling embrace. "Yes," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'm your father now. All of you. You're my kids, my family, and I will always protect you. Always." Orion and Alara pressed closer, their small bodies warm against him. Alara let out a happy, bird-like chirp, her downy crest turning a bright, innocent yellow. Lyra squeezed him tightly. "Our family?" she echoed. The Daxamite word for home. Ziha, soft on her lips. "You are our Ziha, Nathan." With the immediate threat neutralized and their bond forged in fire, the work on the Wanderer took on a new meaning. It wasn't just an escape vessel, it was their future, built by their shared hands. Nathan, Lyra, and even Orion, helping in small ways, worked tirelessly. The data locket's information was successfully transmitted to a frequency Lyra identified as a potential Daxamite emergency channel, a message of survival, coordinates, and hope sent out into the vast, uncaring galaxy. Finally, the Wanderer lifted from the hidden hangar, a battered but resilient symbol of their new life. They watched Kepler's claim shrink away on the screen, the green woods and distant trading post fading into the blue marble of the planet. Nathan sat in the pilot's chair, Lyra beside him, Orion and Alara curled up together behind them. The stars spread out before them, an endless, daunting canvas. They were just one small ship, one improbable family, against a galaxy that held unimaginable dangers and sorrow. But as Nathan looked back at the children, at Lyra's hand resting on his arm, at Orion's crest glowing a soft, contented blue, he knew the real treasure wasn't out there among the stars. It was here, in this cockpit, in the quiet hum of a ship carrying not just refugees, but a family forged from commitment, ingenuity, and the unshakable belief that love knows no boundaries, whether of species, culture, or the cruelest depths of space itself. A human, a surveyor who sought solitude, had found something far more valuable than peace in the quiet depths of the Kepler woods, a home, built one desperate, loving step at a time.